Kenya produces more than half of the black tea imported by the UK. And most of the land it's grown on was taken from its indigenous communities in brutal evictions during British colonial rule. Some indigenous groups sued the UK government to compensate for these violent land grabs, which have led to generations of poverty.
To King Charles, my message is to correct the mistakes of the settlers.
Kenya gained independence from the UK 60 years ago. So why are these communities still landless and fighting for reparations from the British government? From Nellie Towat's property, she can see the tea estate that took over her family's ancestral land. Foreign tea companies still dominate the region of Kericho, farming hundreds of thousands of acres of tea for export. As tea farms expanded, Nellie and her family were left in poverty.
Ninasikia uchungu sana. Mzungu anakula na mimi nalala njaa. Hakuna hata lanja hakuna. Sapa saa ingine tunakula mboga.
500,000 Kipsigis and Talai indigenous peoples were violently evicted during British colonial rule to make way for the expanding tea industry. During these evictions, many Kipsigis reported they were raped, beaten, and tortured by British soldiers and colonial government officials. Nellie's family was evicted multiple times during this period and again in 1975, after Kenya had already gained its independence.
Kuna siku mama yangu alikuwa anapiga ugali. Sasa trakta mbili, hii haiko na nyororo, hii anavuruta nyumba, alafu hii ya turela tunapanda, tunahamishwa kwa landi. Mbuzi ikaenda. Sasa tukapaki tu hivyo. Tuliteseka sana.
Nellie and hundreds of other Kipsigis families were moved to a village called Chipchabas. They say they were left with no choice but to buy back small plots of land from the tea estate.
This land, when the settlers came early 1920s, what they did, they started to create land for tea plantations.
The village is surrounded by a James Finlay tea estate, which was founded by a British company. The residents are all Kipsigis families that endured evictions.
You know, this settlement is part of James Finlay. Except only that they carved out this area and grouped all the squatters. They called us squatters. In fact, we were not squatters, we were natives. Instead of relocating us, they diverted, made us to be their workers.
For decades, their families lived in so-called squatting settlements within the tea estate. They say they were coerced into strict working contracts in order to stay there. But eventually, in 1975, they were kicked out of those settlements too.
This community was brought from here, the entire area. The village now where we are is this black spot here.
214 families. Each family was allocated 2 acres. 97 is my father's land. Yes. And we were promised that the children will be given a different land elsewhere, which we have waited up to now.
Vile tunaishi hivi. Unaona manyumba yamejaza hapa. Kama wazungu wangeingia, tungekuwa naishi Kitumbe saa hii. Yes. Nyumbani kwa kwetu. Shamba kubwa. Tulikuwa nalima tu vile tunataka. Na saa hii hakuna.
Tea is one of Kenya's leading exports. 5 million Kenyans rely in some capacity on the tea industry for their livelihoods. But conditions on these farms can be exploitative and even violent. Most recently, a BBC investigation revealed more than 70 women working on tea plantations reported being sexually abused by their managers. One of the farms they worked on is operated by James Finlay Kenya. The company says they are delivering a comprehensive action plan to safeguard their staff. Kipsigis families often have no other choice but to work on farms like these or farm tea to sell to them.
Anangojea utengeneze kwanza ndio ahamishe wewe kwa msituni tena. Tukasonga hivyo hakuna shule.
Nellie is a widow and has 9 children. She sells the tea she grows on a small plot of land, but she can barely survive off the income.
Hakuna, si kukula tu. Saa hii naenda saa hii. Nikipata pesa saa hii, ninaenda kununua unga na bei kali. Labda tunakula moja kwa siku. Na tunalala hivyo.
At this tea cooperative, Nellie sells her tea for 20 cents per kilo. That same kilo at a UK supermarket could go for more than $15.
Hii kilo 2 ya gerogoro ni 200. Na sijanunua hata maziwa. Sijanunua sukari. Na nimechuna yote kwa shamba imeisha mpaka wiki hiyo ingine. Na hata shule hakuna. Hata watoto hakuna wa kusoma.
Kipsigi's youth are often left without options to make a living wage. Nelly says some have been arrested after stealing tea from the estates.
Mami makosa magichore amuni ngewere geba kora koita sekari njonga tokosta nguni.
The Kipsigis in Talai have pursued numerous legal actions to reclaim their land and demand reparations. Most recently, in 2022, Kenyans filed a case to sue the British government for $200 billion. Other indigenous tribes like the Kikuyu also suffered mass displacement and abuse at the hands of the British. In the 1950s, the Kikuyu led the Mau Mau uprising to fight for land reform and protest colonial rule. But the British government orchestrated a violent crackdown against them. It's estimated that they killed nearly 100,000 Kenyans and detained another 160,000 in forced labor camps. In 2013, the UK agreed to a multi-million-dollar court settlement to compensate over 5,000 Kenyans for torture, murder, and abuse during the Mau Mau uprising. But the Kipsigis in the Talai haven't received any compensation from the British government. When Kenya gained independence from the UK in 1963, many Kenyans believed they would get their land back. But Kipsigis families like Mary Chepkwani and her son Peter never did.
She told me, this is our land. Now, the British, the settler, will go home. And then this land will revert back to us. She told us this is the spot where we will be occupying.
After independence, post-colonial leaders who came to power backtracked on their promises to redistribute land. Instead, Kenya's new conservative president and his allies bought land with the help of British loans and became the country's new elite landowning class. Mary's family still only has a small plot of land in Chipchabas to farm. Mary is now 96 years old. She still remembers British settlers burning down people's homes. In the early 1900s, British authorities gave Kenyan land to European settlers through a series of laws sanctioned by the British Crown. These laws paved the way for the violent evictions of Kipsigis and other indigenous Kenyans. When Kenya was a British Crown colony, it was ruled by a royally appointed British governor who reported back to the monarchy. Some question how much Queen Elizabeth II knew about the violence committed by colonial forces across the empire during her reign. But during the years of the Mau Mau uprising, she awarded medals to British military officials for their distinguished services in Kenya.
If the monarch never came, we would be free using our land every way we preferred. We would be with our cattle, our sheep, our goats. We would be farming as we wish. And our productivity could be better because we will not be as squeezed as it is now. This is my mother's hut. It was built in 1975. This house actually was built for almost 6 months because we lived outside building it. Whenever it rained on us. It was really a very horrible thing. Very many people, in fact, died because of poor sanitation. The person who had grabbed our land lived in a house with electricity, water inside the house. Comparing with this one, this was hell, and that was heaven.
Like many other Kipsigis people, Peter collects documents as a tool to fight for his land in court. Before being eventually evicted to Chipchabas, Peter's family members lived and worked on the tea estate as resident laborers.
It's one of the villages in the tea estate where we live. People normally lived in such huts. No one was allowed to build a better house. Any good material, only grass-thatched buildings were allowed.
Rules were strict for the families living on the property. In order for them to be allowed to stay, Males aged 16 and older were forced to sign contracts to work on the tea estate. His father signed one of those documents.
By 1958, no cattle was being allowed, and sheep were 20. Goats were nil. Donkeys were nil.
So we are looking at the attempts to find justice in the Kenyan courts against the Finlay's company for the appropriation of the land in which they have suffered irreparable damage over the years. Cannot take their children to school, they live without water and sanitation. Their children cannot get employment, so they are locked in the cycle of poverty.
Peter says they have not seen success in court in nearly 20 years. But he continues to tell his story in hopes that he and his community will finally get reparations for the land they lost and the abuses they endured.
To King Charles, my message is to correct the mistakes of the settlers. So he can correct that mistake and everything will go well if he gives us our right. We will also wish him so well and pray for him as much as we pray for ourselves.